So Blood Runs Cold is an English-spoken Swedish slasher film that takes place completely in the cold. And I always love those kinds of slashers because anytime you get a slasher killer in the cold, it generally ends up working pretty well. I love foreign films, even though this one is completely English spoken. The actors are speaking English, so it's not dubbed at all because I can't stand dubs. I've mentioned that 100 times on the channel. Would much prefer to do subtitles, and honestly, I would prefer to do subtitles and have this be in Swedish mostly, but the fact that everybody is speaking English anyway. And the setting of it is not necessarily set in stone. Uh, it's obviously filmed in Sweden, but I think I saw in the special features that it might actually take place in Missouri somehow. I'm not sure. There was just a Missouri license plate that they were using, so that's just a guess. I don't know how cold it gets in Missouri, but it definitely gets cold in northern Sweden. And let me tell you, I heard that I discovered this film first of all from a channel that I really like, and I was sold right on the cover right away. The killer looks really really good, and I love slashers in the cold, like I said. But I heard like there's a backstory to this where like the settings were so cold that the equipment kept breaking down and it was really really hard to shoot. So that kind of gives this a little bit more authenticity, sorry, and like background and story to it and lure to the film, which I really like. So it was definitely one that I wanted to check out. Now, it's a very run of the mill slasher, very typical stuff going on. You get this girl renting out a house from her manager to escape for a weekend. She's coming back from France where she was working, and she's coming back to her very small hometown in Sweden for a week or two or whatever, and she's renting a house there in the meantime. And this house is very run down. I'll get into that. But she runs into some people at a bar, including an old like flame that she used to date, and they all end up going back to this house. And then a slasher comes and messes everything up. So basically, it's just that kind of story. Now, the kills are really well done. Anytime there's gore on the screen, especially right at the opening, there's a big opening scene that involves this guy with an unrecognizable face because it's just soaked and caked in blood, and he's obviously trying to run from this killer. So the film opens up on a positive note immediately, and basically it goes from there. So there, here's another thing I heard too before watching this film. I heard this was filled with plot holes, so that kind of intrigued me already because I'm like, how bad can this film get with the plot holes and stuff like that? And I'll get into all of that too. So, this woman, like I said, she rents a house. This place is very, very well done. I hope she's not paying much for this place because you got like a rat running around. This place doesn't even seem to have hydro because in the scenes where everybody is there, they have like breath coming out of their mouths, and every time they have to go to the washroom, they end up going to pee outside. So apparently, this place doesn't even have a bathroom. Apparently, it's just a really, it's a really crummy house for somebody to be renting. But she gets there. She ends up going to a bar that night, and then her name is Winona, and we're introduced to this group of friends named Carl, Liz, and Richard. And Richard was her ex-boyfriend that I was talking about. And then Carl and Liz are the couple that just makes out all the time, are super clingy, cannot get their hands off each other. And Richard was, of course, the third wheel until Winona showed up, and he sees her at the bar. He gets all nervous and scared. And then we have Carl, the Liz's boyfriend, who is we all know this guy. We've all met this guy somewhere. He's the guy who just swears all the time. I'm pretty sure nobody in this film says fuck except for Carl. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure nobody says fuck except for him. And he just keeps saying it over and over. Even when people tell him to stop, he'll keep saying it more. And he's just that joke cracking guy, that dirty guy. He's even tells a story to both of them about his job that he just got fired from because when somebody came in to complain, apparently they told Carl to take the papers, like or whatever papers he wanted to give them, and just shove them up his ass. So he jumps on the counter and drops his pants and says, "Go ahead and do it." And he's like, "So I got fired." I laughed at that. But so Richard and Winona, they rekindle and stuff like that. They all make plans to go back to this house. And then they party and then they drink all night. And Winona and Richard kind of have some rough patches because they broke up because Winona wanted to go to France and work and he didn't want to follow. So they have a little bit of a rocky thing going on, but you can tell right from the beginning that they still have feelings. And it's funny that Richard is the hesitant one in this situation because Winona's kind of giving him all the advances and green lights to say that she's cool with rekindling stuff and she clearly has feelings still. And he's the hesitant one. He's like, I really don't want to go down this path and get hurt again, which usually is portrayed vice versa. Usually it's the girl who wants to save her feelings than the guy who's, doing all the chasing and doing all the trying and stuff like that. This one kind of gave it a other way around kind of vibe. And there's another scene with Carl where he's like, don't be a dumbass, man. You have a chance to get laid right upstairs. Like, don't be sleeping on the couch tonight. And, and he's like thinking about it. And lo and behold, they end up hooking up. So that's good. Both of them at least got to have some fun, not just Carl and Liz, who basically do it for the entire film until they get killed, of course. The plot holes that I heard of that were apparent with, there it's not really plot holes. Well, there's one in particular, but there's just a lot of things that character reactions. The reactions really don't make sense. I don't know if it was trying to go for a comedic mode and didn't resonate, but so many character decisions and people's reactions to things. It like I wouldn't say bad acting necessarily, just weird decisions and weird responses to things. The responses that everybody does. Like Winona comes downstairs the next day. She walks into the living room where they were all partying and everything, and her friends are missing at this point. So she goes into the living room. She notices that there's like broken bottles everywhere and blood all over the floor, like a huge puddle of blood. And she's just like, and then she keeps trying to get a hold of her friends. She's texting, she's calling, she's doing that over and over. And she just goes to get a bucket of water and then just starts cleaning up the blood, like this entire pool of blood. Like, oh, well, who knows? Maybe they got into a huge violent ass fight and started stabbing each other and went out for breakfast. Maybe they'll be back in a bit if they're not, home 5 6 hours. I'll just keep calling. Maybe they'll get here eventually. I'll just take care of this for now and get rid of the blood. Lady, like, what the hell's going on? The film is filled with that shit. Like, filled with it. And it's odd. It's not like they were going for a horror comedy, because this is pretty straight up slasher. But it's filled like that. There's another scene where Richard gets an opportunity to attack the killer with an axe, and he runs right up to him and goes and smacks him right from behind and gets him dead in the spine with the axe, and then lets go of the axe and just books it the other way. So no finishing the job and leaving the axe behind. And then the killer, of course, gets up and takes the axe because he's kind of like a supernatural style kind of villain that they went for, like a Michael Myers that just cannot die. He's like the kind of an entity, kind of human in both forms, in both ways. There's obviously a lot of scenes where it seems like your slasher trope with a killer, like, can he teleport? How is he doing things? How is he surviving everything? Stuff like that. He also looks very good. I like the style with the goggles and everything. The axe is always a great slasher weapon, and he looks cool to me. And I like how they went for like that supernatural kind of same vein as Michael Myers kind of thing. But Richard's an idiot, and then he takes his axe and goes to kill Richard because at that point, what else is going to happen to the guy? And then there's a plot hole, a couple of them, but one in particular that I can remember is the manager that rented Winona the house comes to check up on her because she's not returning any of his texts or calls for the last couple of days. and he comes to check on her, and he doesn't see anybody in the house. He leaves a note on the door, and he's driving away from the house, and he's basically on the phone with somebody, and he's driving down the road, and he's like, okay, I'm returning to the office now, and I just checked up, so I'll get back to you later with whoever he's talking to on the phone. And he's like, oh, hang on, I just saw something. And he pulls his car to the side of the road, gets out, and he gets out of his vehicle, and he sees a vehicle there with Winona's license plate, and he's like, what the fuck? And then the next scene is the Winona's car next to the house where he just was, but he was driving down the street. So what, like, the car is right beside the house. He just left the house. He's driving on the phone, but I would assume at least 30 seconds to a minute. And then he sees the car, so, the distance is like 5 feet, but he's driving for half a mile, half a kilometer? Fuck. That scene made no sense, so shit like that goes on. The third act takes place to when Winona finds a cubby hole, and this cubby hole leads to this really cool looking cellar. It's almost like a complete underground floor. It's huge, and there's like ice walls and all kinds of like you know basement looking vibes, but looking extremely cold. So I totally can understand how equipment kept breaking and how hard it was to film this, because as someone who hates the cold, I would have such a hard time making a film like this. But they did a really good job in that part. But there's a whole like chase scene, cat and mouse game going on for the entire third act, just Winona and the killer. And a lot of it has to do with this underground place where there is a layer too, where the killer, brings his people and brings his victims and probably lives, which also is weird because the manager had no idea about this. The manager does end up having a run in with the killer and has no idea who he is. Apparently, he's living in his house that he's renting and has no idea about it. So, another little plot hole there. But they're forgivable because this is just supposed to be a really fun slasher in the cold, and that's all I really went in for in the first place. So, plot holes, like knowing that there was going to be plot holes and stuff like that, didn't bother me. What really got to me more is, like I was saying, just the reactions and the aloofness of the characters when the killing starts to happen and the killings start to happen. Just the way people react is just crazy. There's a scene closer to the end where Winona uses a spray can of something with lighter to create a flamethrower to burn Buddy's face, and the flame is like this big, which is completely unrealistic for a freaking can of spray whatever that she had. And they have more chasing around the house. She ends up going back to this basement, and this is where like kind of the conclusion happens, and she finds an assault rifle down there, which I thought she was holding a shotgun. As soon as she grabbed the gun, I'm like, boom, shotgun. She's good to go. No, it was a freaking assault rifle, and she blasts the guy down, right, with like a whole parade of like 30 shots, and he falls, right. Bitch throws the gun away. Fuck, and then she goes, and I'm like, she grabs a rock, and I'm like, okay, the rock's better than the gun, sure. Unless I hope she ran out of bullets, because if she threw that gun away for nothing, I don't know what to tell her. But she grabs this massive rock and she just slams it on Buddy's face. But not before him opening his eyes, and you see them like pure white. So it kind of adds to that supernatural ghostly element that, this killer who walks around and acts like a huge beastly human has like a supernatural side to him. So I dig that. I dig that in slasher killers where they go a little bit, they don't always have to be realistic and human, to make it good kind of thing. It works both ways, I would say. And the killer is also cannibalistic, so there's a lot of scenes where the killer is chewing on body parts, and They look really good because the practical effects in this film, there is CGI, lots of it, and all of it's bad, but the practical effects that they use are really good. And I say the CGI is bad, I mean, it's not insanely horrible, it works, but you can tell it's CGI. That's the thing about CGI, you can always see it. Whereas practical effects, even though not they might not always look completely effective in the sense of realistic, but at least you know they're actually made, they're actually real. Again, I've touched on that on the channel. So, and yeah, she slams Buddy's head with the rock. It completely caves in, and then she just runs out of the house, and close up on her face of her screaming, and then end credits. So I like how they left that vague and up to interpretation, kind of, and just kept it short. Like the film isn't even that long. It's an hour and 17 minutes, and it says on the back of it, short, sharp, and nasty slasher fun by Dread Central, and it was cool. I'd say it was cool, and you know, it feels cold. So watching these in the wintertime is the best time to watch them, and it definitely feels like you're in some northern country. I mean, it's cold enough here in Canada, so it snows quite often, and yeah, it's cool. I'd say check it out if you haven't already. I mean, this is a spoiler review, but if you haven't watched it, it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of shit in it to laugh at as well. So that's all I got. So yeah, what else can I say? Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice, or if you like my film reviews. And I'll be back with more pretty soon, so stay tuned and cheers.